I'm Catherine Tomlinson, and I started an eco-conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. So I don't just make pottery, I make resources for other potters wanting to be more eco-friendly in their pottery practice. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about sharing everything I've learned along my eco-conscious pottery journey with you. And I'm so glad you're here with me. Let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson, and in today's episode, I want to tell you all about Potter's secret weapon. And I do mean this. Because this is yeah, honestly, this has just changed my life in pottery. So I can't wait to tell you about it. Okay, let's go. What is the secret weapon? Okay, so the secret weapon that potters can use is baking equipment. Now, stay with me because baking equipment, so the baking industry is an absolutely huge industry, and there are, I would say, there are more people doing baking than there are doing pottery. And because of this, I would say that there is a plethora, a kind of, a kind of abundance of incredible tools and equipment and facilities that bakers have invented, basically, that help them in their bakery practice, that we can utilize as potters. Because baking, if you think about the what you're doing, it's in pottery and in baking, it's almost the same thing. You're just like heating it a bit hotter, and dough can often be like a kind of, we're having to do similar processes. We're kneading that clay, bakers are kneading their dough. We're creating recipes, it could be a clay recipe, it could be a glaze recipe. We're doing the same thing. We're mixing ingredients together, we're mixing dry ingredients together, we're adding like a liquid. That's what bakers are doing too. We're, if you think about like sugarcraft, all the incredible things that the cake makers, sugar crafters do with sugar, and that fondant is a very similar consistency to clay. So at some point, it suddenly dawned on me that I could use baking equipment, and that actually there was like a huge range of equipment I could have access to if I just changed my mindset slightly to be like, well, I could use this equipment as, I'm not going to bake with it, but I could still, utilize it. It suddenly opened my eyes to just how much cool stuff there was that I could have access to then as a potter, that I could use in my practice, that bakers were using for their practice, and doing a fantastic job baking with it. So right, let me talk you through some really cool things that I've use that are actually like baking equipment. So if you're thinking like, say like you want to do some intricate designs on something, or you want to do some lettering, or you want to do I don't know, even cutting pieces of clay out. Bakers have specialist equipment for all of this stuff. They do lettering, they do sugar crafting, they do they have special cutting tools for fondant. All of these things potters can use. So there's like all this equipment. So if you want to do any of those things, I would seriously advise you to look at what sugar crafters use, what bakers use, for for like doing those tasks, for doing lettering, for doing, they have specialist brushes as well for painting on things. We can use them for glaze painting. So so all those things like cutting, measuring, building those like intricate, like beautiful designs, in sugarcraft. We can use all of those things. So I want to talk to you about a few things that I've used that are actually specifically baking items that are amazing, and like that really open my eyes to this whole world of cool equipment available to potters, basically. Okay, so the first thing to say is baking mixing bowls are amazing for making glazes. Using, to have water in pottery, to, pour things. So I'm holding up at the moment like a specialist baking mixing bowl with one of those kind of rubber feet that means it doesn't slip. It's got a handle and it's got a spout. Which is just incredible. So say I was making a glaze in a, in a special baking mixing bowl, I could then just, pour that glaze into a bucket. It's got that spout on. So, they are made to make baking easier, and they will make our lives easier as potters as well. So, those kind of specialist mixing equipment, jugs, measuring out liquids, all of that stuff, amazing for potters as well. Okay, so the second thing to tell you about is, just to say on the mixing bowl front, I actually have 3 of those bowls that nest together. So I just got those from the supermarket, and they're absolutely fantastic. And all those bowls, they're just brilliant. I use them every day. I use one for keeping water in when I'm throwing. I mix glazes in the other. I weigh out ingredients using another one on the scales. Baking scales, that's another thing, that I actually use. I just use kitchen scales for baking, and I weigh out all my ingredients on those. So obviously you've got scales, mixing bowls. We've got spatula, silicone spatula. Amazing. So so a baker would use that for like scraping out cake mixture from a mixing bowl. At the end they're scraping it all out, they're putting it in the oven, they want to get all of that goodness out of that mixing bowl before they wash it. That's what we can do too, when we're making up, say, like a slip, or if we're making up a glaze, we can use, or if we've used that bowl for like throwing on the wheel, you can use a silicone spatula for getting those little bits of clay out of the bottom. When clay when you're making a pot on the wheel, and you put your hands in the water and all that, the clay goes off your hands and like sinks to the bottom of your water bowl. You can use a silicone spatula I just got from the supermarket again, and you can use that for scraping out that bowl, and just making it such a easier job to clean, and you're getting all those scraps out. You can recycle all of that clay, or if you're using it to get out, so like you've just made a glaze or something, you can just get all of that glaze out, or so you don't waste anything. So yeah, silicone spatula, I love this tool and I use it all the time. And I'd be lost without my silicone spatula. I'd just be wasting materials, because it would be like stuck in that bowl and I'd have to like wash it all away, So yeah, amazing. Okay, and then there's a whole another genre. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, there's a whole nother kind of group of tools that are specifically for people using sugarcraft. So they're basically using fondant, and they're cutting shapes out of fondant. They're creating like beautiful intricate designs out of fondant, like sugar fondant, and they're creating those for cakes. And so there's a huge range of equipment that we can use as potters that are designed for sugar crafters. And I've basically been using some of this equipment in my own work. So I'm going to talk you through a couple of things that I use, which are actually baking equipment things. So the first thing is a little cutter that is used for cutting out fondant circles. And I actually, it's like a little plastic cutter, and you basically push it into I push it into rolled out clay, and then I can, it's got one of those sort of spring actions where you can push out the little circle, from the back. And that is for doing like dots of sugar fondant on a cake sort of thing, sticking those onto a cake. And I actually use this cutter to cut out little feet for a little kind of soap dish that I make, called the Ifly dish. And so what I do is I roll out clay using rolling guides, so it's the same thickness, and then I basically cut little feet using this baking cutter, which cuts out a little circle, and then I stick those little feet onto my Ifly dish, and that creates a kind of beautiful like little feet that kind of holds it a little bit, above. Yes, it's got these four little feet on. So that's the first tool I use, and I would be lost without this circle cutter. I mean, imagine trying to hand cut circles, or even just oh gosh, I don't know, even like, trying to cut around something. Why do that when you can press them out using a specialist tool for making small circles for baking, for sugarcraft? It's amazing. And I've got like a massive top tip actually for you. So one time I was watching this video about how to craft flowers out of sugarcraft, because just like so interested in this, just because it was so similar to crafting, things out of pottery. And the person using this kind of sugar mold used corn flour. They used a little bag filled with corn flour, and they would kind of puff this bag onto their equipment, and that would just give a really fine layer of corn flour that meant that the sugar then wouldn't stick to the equipment. And I thought, I wonder if you could use the same technique with clay, because corn flour would obviously just burn away in the kiln, but you need something to stop it from sticking, and that's what I use. So I started brushing on corn flour. So I have corn flour I just got from the supermarket in a little jar, and I just paint it on with like a makeup brush and like dust it onto so I would dust it onto anything that I was using as a cutter or anything that I was using as a mold, and it like just stops that clay from sticking. So quite often sugar craft molds are made of silicone, and they will naturally stick to clay. So that's why I use corn flour to stop it from sticking. And I have to say, it's amazing, and it's really cheap, and you can just you don't need very much at all. You literally just dust it in that silicone mold. So that's what we're coming on to next. So sugar crafting is a huge industry, and it has like, I would say, probably thousands of different molds that you can get for sugar crafting. And that's what sugar crafters will do is they will get a sugar fondant, and they will push it into the mold, and then they will turn it out, and then they can use that like intricate, beautiful shape. It can be animals, there's so many molds out there. Honestly, I would really, if that's something you might be interested in your work, sticking some kind of design or motif or something onto your pottery, as a design, then sugar crafting, is incredible. Like, you have a look at the molds that are out there, and there's just hundreds of them. And they're like sort of festive ones, because they know that, lots of bakers will be making cakes, around say like different holidays, or there could be like sort of Christmas themed ones, holiday themed ones, you name it, they've got the mold for it. So it's amazing. There's a lot more for bakers in that respect than we would have as potters. Okay, so I'm going to show you a mold. I'm holding up a silicone mold that I actually use to make my dragonfly designs. And what I do is I push the clay into this mold, and I use, like I said to you, I brush in some corn flour, and then I push slightly hard clay. I don't use soft clay. I push slightly harder clay into that mold, and it's a soft silicone mold, and I let the clay dry a little bit in that mold, and then I can just turn it out. So it's a flexible mold, and I can, when the clay is dried a teeny weeny bit to the point where I can just pop it out, I basically pop that shape out, and then I can stick it on my work. So I stick it on my work with a combination of, like, I quite often use a bit of vinegar to like melt, just ever so slightly melt the surface of what I'm sticking the motif on, the dragonfly on, and then I would stick it on with like a bit of casting slip. I just take a little bit out the bucket, and then I just paint. Paint that's got paper clay in as well, so it makes the join like super strong. It's got paper in. So I paint that on the back of the little piece of clay that I've just popped out of the mold, and then I stick it onto my work, and that creates a really strong bond with the vinegar and the slip. I love the design. The designs are beautiful, and I'm always like keeping an eye out for like new designs, and they just look amazing done in clay. So you don't have to use these with sugarcraft. You can use it with clay. Amazing. Okay, so the next thing to tell you about is, if you want to do, so I always found this really tricky in pottery. I've had a few times where people have asked me to like make a pot for someone, for example, and they wanted writing on the pot, and I think writing in pottery, kind of trying to score writing in pottery is really tricky. It can be really tricky. So there are two ways that I think sugar crafters make writing. Which I've seen after doing like loads of research on like how can I do writing in clay well? How can I make it look professional? Because every time I try and handwrite in clay, it's not good. It doesn't look good. And it's very difficult to kind of score that writing in the clay. I don't know, it doesn't look good when I try and do it. I think I would probably need a huge amount of practice to be able to do it well, and just really perfect my technique. So what I do instead was I went to the baking industry and I was like, help me, how do you do writing? How do you write things on a cake? And there's two ways they do it basically. The first way is that they have little cutters for writing. So essentially exactly like you were cutting out like a little circle or a little, whatever shape, whatever. They have, they don't just do circles. They've got like hundreds of different, cutters of different, but they that you can get cutters for lettering. And it's kind of, they maybe be about 1.5 centimeters. And the idea of sugar fondant, they roll out the sugar fondant very, very thin. Again, they're using, that corn flour. They just puff a bit of corn flour on. They would cut out the letter with a special cutter, and then pop it out of the cutter. It would have a spring back that would push the letter out of that cutter, and then they would stick it on the cake. But there's been times I thought that's amazing, that's brilliant, but I need smaller writing than that. I need smaller writing. Say if you're doing like just a little, you're pressing, you want it on a pot in the, say like the base of the pot or something, you just want a little lettering to say like, this is for you, so I thought, what am I going to do? Like I need smaller lettering. And that's when I found letters that you can actually press into clay and sort of embossing, into the clay. You're pushing it into the clay. And there's loads of these in Sugarcraft, but I actually found some two really fantastic sets of lettering that were made from metal, and they're kind of like an italics type letter. And what I do is I just take each letter is individual. It's an individual block. If you think about a bit like they used to use for printing, printing old books, and they would have all the letters like lined up. They would basically, make these big blocks of letters, and that's how they would like say print a book. God, it just dawned on me how much work that would have taken to arrange all these tiny letters, in a block. Blimey. So it's exactly the same principle. You're basically just using individual letters and you're pressing them into the clay. And again, I brush a bit of corn flour on these letters before I press them into the clay, because I don't want that clay like sticking to the letter, and then like pulling at the clay. All I want is the letter impressed into the clay. So I basically press a letter, press another letter to write a word into the clay. And it works really well. It looks really good. It looks so much better than if I would have like just written it by hand. So that's my absolute top tip. Like especially, if you're trying to write something, those letters, pressing them into your work is just, those little blocks. So good. Okay, so like I hope you've enjoyed this episode on Potter's secret weapon, baking equipment, because honestly, it's opened up a huge world of possibilities, like creative possibilities. And when I look at that baking equipment, I just feel like I get so many ideas just like flooding in my mind of things that could be done in pottery with this like really cool equipment. And like I said, it's a whole massive industry that potters can have access to and use in their work. We have almost the same substance that we're using. We can use all of this stuff and we can just create all of this incredible stuff that cake makers have like created for themselves, in that industry. And the world's our oyster. It's amazing. So when it comes to that equipment, it's amazing. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I loved talking to you about it, and I love baking equipment, and I can't wait to might just go and have a little browse now, actually, have a little look. Have a little look at like seasonal molds or something. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been so nice to talk to you about it, and yeah, happy potting until then. Like, happy if you're using baking equipment, if you're not, like, just wishing you very happy potting, and really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Yeah, bye. So, if you enjoyed that and you're interested to learn more about eco-conscious pottery, head over to the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. I can't wait to see you there.